YouTube, Antics here with the swole on, the fro on, and if you need the explainer, I am the Alpha Tamer, but it is not about me today, it is about this gentleman in front of me. Will you please introduce yourself?
How's it going, guys? I am an avid herpetologist, and I brought Machindramon with me to Nationals this year.
Alright, so Machindramon isn't the only reason I'm interviewing you. It's because of what you did with Machindramon. Would you please tell us what your placing was?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, I wound up with a 6-2 record and a 23rd placement. So just barely squeaked out of top 16, but we gave it our best shot. It was a rough start to the day. At the end of round 3, we were 1 and 2, and it was just wins from there on. So
this man went top 32 with Machindramon. Editor, I have to see this deck profile. Please hit my music. And will you please take us through the deck?
Absolutely. Starting off, 4 eggs. We have the 4 copies of Machindramon, which, if we're just being honest, is still not super ideal. This is just really the best that black base has to offer, and I have always been a huge black base stan. I've played Machindramon about every way possible. I've done black, red, purple. Currently, I personally am a big fan for black because it lets us have a lot of turn 1 plays that I think the other bases don't have access to. And in a format where we need to be very quick out of the gate, I think black is just the way to go. Until we get a more dedicated machine egg, I think Mani is just the best for generic disposable draw. As far as rookies, we have 3 copies of Fuguru, still the oldest card in the deck. Bandai, I don't know why you still haven't made any reprints of this card with other artwork, but we still have the original EX1 printing. 3 copies is about right. This is a card that I want to play from my hand more often rather than in breeding, but if I don't have another rookie, I'm still happy to just get the draw off of it. It's still decently and does the job pretty well. Gets our trash loaded pretty early, but in my personal opinion though, the big takeaway for the rookies has to be the copies of Machindramon. This is one of the newest additions for Machindramon. Having a rookie that start of main gives us the same effect that BT11 Analog has is basically just another way to get our trash loaded as fast as possible. This is a card I want to see in my opening hand as often as I can, just so I can have that in raising to push forward. Absolute best case scenario, if I'm looking for an opening hand, if I have a Machindramon and I can follow it up with the only champion that we're playing, which is the 3 copies of the brand new Blimpmon, that's like a flawless open. Being able to push forward, discard, draw 1, gain 1, go into a Blimp, immediately draw and check another 3. Beautiful, beautiful open. Having a champion that we can evo, in my personal opinion, we've had like the promo Raremon for a while, which has a similar effect to Haguru, but Raremon kind of walked so Blimpmon can run. I think this card is just so much better than Raremon ever was. And if you want my completely honest opinion, if you're trying to pick up machine, I think how you use this Blimpmon is actually a really big litmus test for how good you're going to do. Like, this is a big skill check for the deck, because even though it reads as a very simple effect, it has a lot of different applications that can actually completely make or break how your games go. Learning when to tuck or when to add to hand, learning what you can do when you're tucking cards, knowing that you can get more Cyborgs into the trash faster that way, or just being able to add certain cards to hand to set up interaction. Like, there's so many different ways that this card can be used. In general, just a really solid card, and whatever you don't add, you can add to top or bottom, so it just gets through the deck even faster if you haven't yet found the card that you're missing. So really solid. All right, now it's going to be the long and drawn out part, because now we go into the Cyborgs. I am playing 16 total, starting with, in my opinion, the strongest in the deck, and that's going to be the 2 copies of Machindramon from EX9. This is the big OTK enabler. Ideally, a lot of the OTK combos are going to be attacking, unsuspending, and stripping this as the bottom source, so you can reattach it one way or another. Generally speaking, you're going to be doing that with cards like Chaosdramon or Chaosdramon X Antibody. But I actually realized right before the event, and did it a couple times, there are combos you can do with this where if you only have this showing and just one Machindramon, you can actually win with this off of 4 security, as long as you have a single security +1 inherit. So basically, you have this, 3 other sources, you swing, don't use Machindramon's on play when attacking, just skip it entirely until the end of the first attack. When you unsuspend and detach this, on the second swing, you can reattach it and recycle the unsuspend to potentially go for game. Really powerful card. I'm only playing 2 just because I'm actually trying to maximize my consistency. I want to have as few repeating names as possible, so the first 4 Cyborgs that I see as I'm playing are all going to be unique and can be used for assembly as quickly as possible to just get off the ground. So only 2 copies, and I'm supplementing that with a single copy of Sharkmon. It's another unsuspend that's not quite as good as Machindramon, but it does get the job done, and does have an on-play de-digivolve effect that helps get through the older what's it called? Venusmon. The older Venusmon, being able to de-digivolve that on play instead of when attacking. Not too many cyborgs have that effect at the moment. The new Oblivia is going to be able to thankfully have that as well, but having a way to de-digivolve Venusmon to help continue our combo turn, it is nice to have, and it's just a third unsuspend effect. For the Security +1 inherits, we have our Metal Greymon from EX9, Rise Greymon, which can play Tamers out when digivolving over a blimp, and then, again, Volcanomon. I did have 2 copies of Metal Greymon earlier. I've gone, again, for 3 unique names, because they can all be tucked together. And again, if I see multiple copies, all of them can be unique names that can all be added to assembly, combined together. It basically just, again, smooths out the draws and makes sure that I'm not potentially bricking on multiple cards of the same name, which can slow your turns down significantly if you do find yourself in that position. Another card I am playing 2 of is going to be EX9 Metal Mame. This card is just some of the best removal in the game, especially with TS being the top deck. Being able to bottom deck cards like Minerva, obviously not quite as good against things like the new Venus or Neptune because they have protection, but if they're trying to stall you out with cards like Minerva and just setting up a bunch of blockers, you can get rid of it super easy. Another super underrated use for this, you can strip the rookie out of your opponent's sources by just having 1 face down. So if you play this out of your hand without passing, strip the rookie, digivolve Chaosdramon on top of this to triple de-digivolve, and they wind up back at the egg again, which can actually out a stack just by using that interaction. So really solid card. I am playing 2 copies because I think the way the source stripping works just has enough uses. It's practical enough to be played at 2. My only DP buffs are going to be 2 different copies of +4K. Again, 2 unique names just to make sure that they can be tucked together and are not potentially clogging my hand with duplicate names. So a copy of Cyberdramon and Alteris. Another card I'm playing 2 of, we have our EX9 Metal Tyranno, which is going to not only be able to suspend bodies down, which if our opponent's sitting on single blockers can help us go for game, but obviously the much bigger and more important use is de-digivolve protection as well as bounce to hand or bottom deck protection. Really good, again, if you're dealing with decks such as Venus, for instance, the new Venus, if they can strip your sources, but they won't be able to actually bottom deck you if you have that protection live. So little interactions like that can be good for just keeping your tempo going. One of the other most important cards in the deck right now, though, is the 2 copies of Oblivimon. This is getting replaced by the new EX11 Oblivi just because it's strictly better with an on-play, but this is the card that kind of lets Machine do what a lot of other decks in the format can't. Being able to not have your attack be redirected means even if your opponent's board is set up with, 6 TS bodies and a Theater of the Seas or whatever it's called, in security with tons and tons of blockers, even, Jesmon, Genku X Antibody, all these decks that can produce all of these redirections, you can just ignore them entirely and just go for game, which realistically you're going to have to do since so many of these decks can actually force interaction if they are able to declare their blocks. So having Oblivi just basically lets you combo through these unbreakable boards and just go for game regardless. The 2 remaining Cyborgs, we have a single copy of BT7 Metal Greymon. Very simple, on play gain 2/2 memory. It's really good for helping to extend your resource plays if you are short on other extenders such as memory setters, if you have Supreme Connection, things like that. It basically just gives you those 2 so you can hopefully get your combo off without passing turn. And my favorite personal tech card in the entire deck is going to be Cyberdramon X Antibody. This is not a card that I personally have seen any other machine list running, but I think this gives us a lot of really important breakpoints, allowing us to win off of 1 security even if our board is completely empty, by passing our opponent a full 10 memory if we need to. Basically, the Inherit just lets us trash any of our option cards in our battle area to trash our opponent's top security. So if we can aggress our opponent down to that really low life total, it just lets us get that opportunity to just blitz a fresh body in with just this as a source, trash the last security, and actually end the game immediately. So it's just really good for closing the door if we absolutely have to. A lot of decks in the format can recover if you give them that extra turn. This does not give them that extra turn. So that's going to do it for my Cyborg lineup. As far as level 6s go, it's a pretty straightforward set. Not too much variation from other lists, but we have our 4 copies of EX9 Machindramon, of course. This is our primary combo enabler. The way that I've set my list up, I try to be able to win with just this, not needing other cards, but obviously there's going to be certain circumstances where he's not going to be enough on his own. So we do have our 2 copies of Chaosdramon. Great backup plan if we don't see our machine early on, where we can play Cyborgs from our hand for super cheap, digivolve onto those bodies, and then present a lot of aggression early in case we don't have this. And if we do have this, and we're just trying to hold off and force interaction early without having to commit our primary game plan, Chaosdramon can also force or bait interaction in those early turns. So super good there. Last level 6, our single copy of Chaosdramon X Antibody. A lot of people refer to this as a win more card, and I don't think they're entirely wrong. But I will say that this does have some very specific uses that I would not cut this card entirely. The biggest and most important is that if you do establish an early Chaosdramon, this gives you a way to extend on top of that. And even though that's not always necessary, there are definitely circumstances and were times during the event yesterday where I set one of these up early and was able to combo off thanks to my ability to Digivolve back and reattach some sources, like for instance Machindramon. You can detach it, use Chaosdramon to reattach it. It's just a way to keep the combos going and push aggression. So I'm not going to ever cut below a single copy. I do think you should be playing one mandatory. I was playing two, but I was noticing a lot of bricking, so I ended up cutting one of my megas for more consistency cards at the lower level. So that's going to be my reasoning there. All right, moving up into the Tamers. I actually recently cut one of the Tamers just before the event, so I'm actually only playing the 3 copies of the BT11 and 3 copies of EX9. Previously, I was playing 4 copies of BT11 and 3 of the EX9. Yeah, that's right. 4 of this and 3 of this. I ended up cutting one of these just because I found myself getting clogged on them a lot. These cards are obviously fantastic on like the first couple of turns, but once we get into the later turns, kind of into the mid-range of the game, these cards can just kind of sit in your hand. They're just too expensive for what I need to be doing with some of those later turns. So cutting one of these for some cheaper search power, again, like more rookies, additional option cards, I found that helped out a lot. I was seeing these kind of cluttering up my hand a lot less during the event yesterday, so I feel like the 6 is just about right. Even though I feel like on most turns I generally prefer to lead the BT11, there are honestly a pretty even number of circumstances where I want both of these, so I went with a 3-3 split instead of 4 and 2 for that reason. I think the setter is plenty good on its own to justify having an equal number of copies. Last, before we close out the deck profile, is just going to be our option cards. Of course, we're going to have our 3 copies of Attack of the Heavy Mobile Digimon. I'm not sure where this is going to be easiest to see, but we'll put it there. Our 3 copies of Attack of the Heavy Mobile, our big blitz option that lets us get our combo turns off, as well as pushing massive aggression on a completely empty board, which is exactly what we want. We have our 4 copies of Supreme Connection, by far the best consistency card in the deck, while also letting us drop the Machindramons from our hand for a net cost of only 3, with our memory setter that guarantees we're going to be able to keep our turn and actually push through our aggressive combos. But I wanted to supplement that with some other searchers, so I ended up going with 2 copies of Garnet Memory Boost and 2 copies of Defense Training. In total, that's going to give us 8 delay options that we're able to trash for our Cyberdramon X antibody. Most of the time, I don't need all of these. I'll end up with quite a few like extra ones sitting in the battle area. 1 or 2 are plenty to get my combo through, so then Cyberdramon X Antibody can just eat one of them if I need to, and hopefully shred whatever last security is sitting there that I needed to get rid of in order to actually push that last attack for game. The reason I ended up going with a 2-2 split, Defense Training is going to not be able to grab cards like our Cyberdramon and BT7 Metal Gray. They're the only 2 non-black cards in the deck. But it's also only digging 2 cards deep. And sometimes I just have to dig deeper to find specific cards that I'm missing, like for instance Megadramon or my 6s. So for that reason I wound up going with 2 memory boosts as the other consistency card. Originally I was playing 2 copies of Black Memory Boost, but when I made the switch from 2 Alteris to 1 Alteris and 1 Cyberdramon, upping my red count to 2 cards, just to make sure that I don't potentially bottom deck those, I wound up going with these, and honestly digging 3 instead of 4 didn't really feel like it made that much of a difference. I feel like this card was perfectly fine on its own, so I went with 2 of these just to round out the consistency cards and just make sure that we can find all of our pieces as quickly as possible.
Wow, so great deck profile, and not that I haven't already spoken to you before this, but I can tell you've been playing Machindramon for a very long time. It seems like you're very much a big Machindramon fan. Is this just the only deck you've piloted since it's came out, or have you ever played any other decks? I need to know.
I have played other decks. This has definitely been my main deck. Anytime I've been competing, it's always been Machindramon since EX1. I've been with the deck ever since the beginning, kept with it over all the updates over the different formats. I do play other decks. I've brought other things to locals pretty frequently. Currently I have generic fish soup built with some Seedramon and some Ryugu support kind of mixed together, just generic good stuff. I am working on getting the new Millenniumon deck built. I think that deck is really, really cool and a lot of fun. Currently I'm just missing 1 promo, and then I'll have that finished and I'll be able to start piloting that a little bit more. I'm also really excited for Tyrannomon. I've kept up with Tyrannomon support over the last couple of sets. and I'm really excited for the new EX11 support. So with the new stuff dropping this last weekend, I'm really excited to have that all together so I can actually play a bit more of Tyranno. There's a couple of other decks. I actually brought Dragon Links to a regional last year and actually made 8th place at that regional with Dragon Links, which was really cool. Have a soft spot in my heart for that deck. That deck is a lot of fun. But yeah, Machindramon has definitely been like my main deck for pretty much my entire time playing the card game.
Awesome. So while we're on the subject of Machindramon, I'm very interested to hear about your tournament run in the sense of like, what did you find was most difficult, or which matchups were most difficult, or did every matchup feel pretty solved for you and that's why you decided to take Machindramon? Tell me a little bit about your thought process.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned during the deck profile, I think Oblivimon is a really unique card that Machindramon has access to that a lot of other decks in the meta just simply don't. And because decks like Jessamon and TS can present so many blocker bodies, having little silver bullets like that can really help the game plan a lot. EX8 Metal Tyranno having Digivolve protection, another good example of just that silver bullet that can help in certain matchups, like Rocks, for instance. Now, granted, I did not come up against Jessamon or Rocks during the event, but the Oblivimon, I did run into Time Saver 4 different times over the course of the 8 rounds, and Oblivimon is a saving grace in all of them. The only round that I actually lost, I beat Time Stranger 3 different times. The first one that I lost was round 3, and the reason I lost game 1 was because I didn't find the Oblivimon. So if I'd found it, I was in a position to win. I just couldn't find it in time. So sometimes that's just what happens. The only other loss that I actually had of the day was CS Omni. All 3 were really close games. It was just a situation where some of the early checks I did gave them a free Nokia and Matt Ties out of their security, both game 1 and game 3. Unfortunately, that's just a lot of free value that I was very hard to come back from. But generally speaking, I think Machine doesn't have any completely bad matchups in the meta right now. There are certain ones like Dioboro can be a little challenging, but Dioboro is also so like uncommon, I feel like, that it's not something I'm like overly concerned about, and the deck still has ways to answer that deck. Like Metal Mame stripping the Inframon out of the sources is a really good way to kind of take the teeth away from some of their interactive plays. But in general, since you mentioned like whether or not certain matchups were solved, in prep for nationals, that was like one of my big focuses, was just trying to play against all of like the decks that I thought were the most common in the meta and just have a game plan for each one of them. One of the big ones, like Medusa as a good example. Again, I never even ran into Medusa yesterday, but as an example of how like I kind of know what pieces to look for certain matchups, if I'm playing against Medusa, I know they're probably going to promote and not end the game right away. Generally, they're going to push up, do some interaction, maybe trash a few security, and end on either the Medusa itself or Styraco. If they do that, ideally I want to try to find like Metal Mame to get a source out, and then Chaosdramon to de-digivolve, and that's a really easy way to just completely out the stack, reset them to square one, and that's not a deck that can really recover without something in breeding area right away. So it basically buys me an entire turn if I can pull something like that off. So that's just like one example with Medusa specifically, but I kind of like have a set game plan regardless of which deck I'm up against. I generally have a good idea of like which inherits are going to be the most important for those matchups.
Awesome. And one last question for you. This is actually a very different question than I usually ask on deck profiles, but what was your favorite non-Digimon related thing that you did this weekend?
Ooh, that's a great question. So my wife actually joined me on this particular trip. Since I did not happen to make day 2, instead I decided to use my Sunday to tour around Nevada with her. So we ended up doing the Hoover Dam this morning, and then got to see Red Rock Canyon this afternoon. Highly recommend Red Rock if you've never been there and you're in the Nevada area. Absolutely beautiful scenery. I'm more of a wildlife guy, but it's a little chilly out. Didn't really get to see too many animals, but the scenery is absolutely stunning. Could not recommend it enough.
Awesome, awesome. And do you have any shout outs? Do you possibly have a channel of your own that you want to plug?
Absolutely. I am an avid herpetologist on YouTube. Some of you may have already seen my channel before, but if you haven't, definitely check me out. My reputation in the card game community is definitely as the Machindramon player. So being here at Nationals and having a decent showing with Machindramon, I am super, super excited. I'm glad to finally have some real, genuinely good results under my belt with this deck. So I can find the deck that I've been hyping all this time, I can finally rest on my laurels and feel like I've represented this weekend. So I'm really happy. But yeah, avid herpetologist on YouTube. Feel free to check in and subscribe if you haven't already, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the deck profile, but most importantly, congratulations. This is an incredible showing. Like to make top 32 with this deck, the only one represented. there were a few black decks that topped, and like I just think the black decks being able to represent in general is just humongous, and so congrats to you.
I appreciate that very much, and I will give another shout out to Ben, actually. Ben-Ben's another fellow DigiTuber who I believe took 3rd place overall at this Nationals, which is incredible, and he did it with a black deck. I'm pretty sure he was piloting rocks this weekend.
Yeah,
so
he was, yeah.
Big congratulations to Ben. That was an awesome finish.
All right, yep, congrats to him as well. And YouTube, I already gave you guys the explainer, but I'm gonna give it to you one last time. I am the Alpha Tamer. Peace.